Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Blue Halo Podcast, a show where we bring together religion, the Bible, law enforcement, and the justice system. I'm your host, Jeff Wambolt, and I have a lot to share with you. Not only today, but throughout the life of this show. I'll bring you examples and stories of how God is involved in all aspects of our life with an emphasis on law enforcement. You see, I'm an old-timer veteran of law enforcement, and I will share my stories and stories of my fellow officers and corrections officers and even the courts, all areas of the justice system where God is at work. Do you remember our prayer from the last episode? Let's find out. God is good all the time. That's right. So, speaking of the last episode, which was our premiere episode, if you remember, I jumped right in with let's say a shocking story when I told you about Emily, little Emily. I hope you all caught the meaning. That even in sadness and tragedy, God is with us and good can come from it. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because you can all go back and listen, but I just want to reinforce a couple important positive takeaways from that episode. Okay, and the first is this. The fact that we can learn from other people's mistakes, and that even though we humans, right, we're just human, we're not perfect, God still finds a way to find goodness in an evil situation. So if you haven't listened to that episode, please do so. Or if you already have, please share it with someone or listen with your children and explain to them these concepts in your own way. You know your children best. Now let's move on to today's episode. How do you treat other people in your everyday lives? That's the question. Have you ever thought about that? I mean, really, really thought about it. Do you take time for others? Or do you rush them in and out of your day? How about your own family? Especially the older members, the elderly. Today's show is about how we treat our elderly population. It's important. They need more help than most, right? Our senior population. Are we patient and kind? Or are we quick? Are we quick to get frustrated? Are we quick to judge? None of us want to admit this, but I'll wager most of us have failed in this area at one time or another. I'm no exception. I'm not proud of this. I'm not proud of this at all, but I do have a few theories, or maybe they're philosophies to share with you, and maybe I can help give you an idea as to maybe how not to do this as often. In a few moments, I'll share a tip that I use. But to start with, let me share something to make you think. I found it one day when I was reading the newspaper. In the religious section of my local newspaper, there's a national column that comes in once in a while called the God Squad. It's pretty good. A lot of useful information. Maybe you have it in your own newspaper. But anyway, there's a very strong message in this anecdote that I want to share with you. And here it is. It's a conversation between a student and a teacher. So here's how it starts. A student asked his teacher, "What is the difference between heaven and hell?" The teacher replied, "In hell, all the people are sitting around a huge table filled with every kind of delicious food and wine. They can see the food and smell the food and touch the food, but they can't bring the food to their mouths because their arms are locked and they're stiff." "That is indeed hell," said the student. "And what is heaven?" The teacher responded, "Well, in heaven, all the people are sitting around a huge table filled with every kind of food and fine wine. They can see the food, and they can smell the food, and they can touch the food, but they can't bring the food to their mouths because their arms are locked and they're stiff." This puzzled the student, and she asked, "Teacher, what is the difference between heaven and hell then? The stories were the same." The teacher smiled and said, "In heaven, the people are feeding each other." What'd you think of that? I like stories like this. They're very basic, but just like Jesus' parables, it has a strong message. And many times it has more than one message. I think this one has several, so I'm going to reserve the right to use it again to make another point on future episodes. So one of the takeaways I see here correlates with today's topic. How do we treat each other? Of course, heaven and hell probably are not literally like this story, but it's a great example to show some human characteristics like greed, selfishness, maybe judgment. Those are some of the negatives. But also on the flip side, there's patience, kindness, generosity, helpfulness, right? And love, of course. Our story uses the same setting for both heaven and hell. People are sitting around a huge table with all the best food and drink, right? In a way, that represents paradise, doesn't it? People are hungry. There's plenty of food. All they have to do is take it. It's there for them. God provided. God provided. Just take and eat. But wait, their arms are locked, right? If they pick up the food, they won't be able to bend their arms to put the food in their mouths. What a dilemma. But like always, God provides. But it's up to us to implement. So in hell, they starve, don't they? Because they're selfish. They're greedy. They're too uncaring to help one another, right? So they starve. They want the food, but in hell, they can't get it because their arms are stiff, right? They're locked out and they won't bend at the elbow. Now, of course, we have to give some leeway here to the story, right? Could they have bent over at the waist to eat by shoving their faces into the food and not using their hands? Yeah, I suppose. But let's stick with the meaning of the story. Nobody can eat because they can't bend their arms. And they are so greedy and so selfish and so uncaring of others that they don't see the obvious before them. What's the obvious? Work together. Work together to feed each other, help each other, care for one another. Don't be selfish. I remember reading a saying when I was growing up that I saw on a church kiosk. It said, God helps those who help themselves. Think about it. God gives us the tools, but it's up to us to implement them, right? To use them. A hammer all by itself isn't going to pound the nail. We need to pick up that hammer and use it in the way it was meant to be used. So what about our elderly population? When I was preparing for this episode, it was this question that made me think about the saying I just mentioned about God helping those who help themselves. I think it needs to be changed, though, just a little bit. I'd like to change that saying, though, and add the word others to it. God helps those who help themselves and others. Now, do we have to? No. Jesus died for our sins, paid the price for us, but because of his sacrifice, we should want to do his work. This is one of the things I want to share. Many people, me included, when I was younger, thought that we can all get into heaven by doing good works. If we're good people, we get to go to heaven after we die. That actually makes sense, doing good works. Our human world, in a way, is centered around this type of philosophy, isn't it? If we do well at our job, we get rewarded with pay or a raise in pay. As a child, if we ate all our dinner, let's say, we got dessert. Seems to make sense. It does in some cases, but not in grace. Let me tell you, it took a while for me to get this. But when I did, when it hit me and the light bulb went on, it went on. 1 million megawatt bulb went on and boom, there it was. Here's what I want to share with you. We don't get to heaven because of our good deeds. We do good deeds because we appreciate God's grace and Jesus' ultimate sacrifice. So because we are saved, we want to do good works. We want to do those good deeds. It went against my belief system when I was younger. I didn't get it at first, but when I did, I wanted to shout from the rooftops. Have you ever felt like that? Nothing wrong with it. People may look at you funny though, but they'll listen, hopefully. My big turning point came with several discussions with a couple friends in the police department. My buddy Les would try to explain Christianity to me, and I would fire back with questions, a lot of questions. But what about this or what about that? And he stayed patient though, and had answers for all my questions. And then one day I was double teamed. Not at the same time, but now I had 2 of my peers in the department talking to me. Now, was that a sign? I'd like to think so, but I don't know. But it was this second man. He introduced me to a book called The Jesus I Never Knew, written by Philip Yancey. It's a great book, amazing book. But it was this book that brought me the last few steps to the top of the mountain. And it was amazing. And I wanted to shout from the top of that mountain. And I did, actually, for a while. I bought a copy, too, of that book for a bunch of other people. I wanted to share the information. I wanted everyone to know. And I did that with a few other books, too. So what I'm getting at is this. Share the good news in whatever way you want. For me, I calmed down a bit and realized my excitement. The excitement I had was turning some people off. So I slowed down. I slowed down a bit. I was more methodical and more subtle. That worked better. I still got my points across, just in a different way. But I'll tell you, when that mega light bulb goes off, it's hard to contain the light. That's the light of Jesus. So what does the Bible say about this? About how to treat our elderly population? Well, in 1 Timothy chapter 5, verses 1 and 2, it says, "Do not rebuke an older man, but encourage him as you would a father. Younger men as brothers, older women as mothers, younger women as sisters, in all purity." That's what it says. So what does this mean? Well, first, I wanted to know what rebuke meant. I mean, I have a general understanding. So to me, before I looked up the definition, it meant turn away or shoot down. That's what I thought. You know, like rebuking somebody's idea, shoot down that idea. So that was close to the intent of the passage, but it wasn't quite there. When I dug a little deeper, I found that rebuke in this sense means admonish or to chide someone, which means to scold, right? Now think about that for a minute. Scolding or to scold your parent or an elderly person. I think this is more in line to what 1 Timothy means by rebuke. Don't scold the older man or woman, father or mother or grandparent for that matter. Instead, what does it say? Encourage as we might a younger person. I like that much better. But it's hard sometimes, isn't it? I know that, but we should. I remember my own grandmother near the end of her life. She was in her 90s at the time. She was in a nursing home, but she wasn't always happy. There were good days and there were bad days, and there were a lot of days that contained a lot of complaining. And I have to say, at that age, not only is it natural maybe to complain, but she earned that right, in my opinion. Now, don't get me wrong. I wasn't rude or anything. I loved her and I listened, but I was annoyed. And maybe I cut the visit shorter than I should have. My mom, though, and to some degree my sisters, but especially my mom, was a saint. She would visit almost every day. What a great example she was for the rest of us. I'm sure it wasn't easy, but she did the right thing. John MacArthur, the pastor of Grace Community Church in Sun Valley, California, said, and I'm quoting here, he said, "A general regard for people in their senior years is of grave concern to God. How you treat your father," and mother, of course, I'm adding that in myself, "is a matter for God to even discuss in the commandments, the 10 Commandments. In fact," he continues, "the death penalty was required for disrespect or striking your father or mother or for cursing your father or mother." And this was in the book of Exodus. "Those who are older are to be treated with kindness and love and honor and respect. So when you confront an older man because of his sin, you do it graciously. You come alongside and appeal to him with the respect that you would give to a father." And we all know, and if you don't, you might want to check it out, that number 5, the 5th commandment says, "Honor thy mother and father." So we need to treat our elderly well. Many of them are lonely. I want to share a story now to illustrate this very point. And please keep in mind that sharing a story of someone's misfortune or of their suffering can be a positive thing, a silver lining, because we can learn from others and hopefully not make the same mistakes. Or we can take corrective action more quickly to help someone else. This is the story of Martha, and she is a beautiful elderly woman. Actually, a lonely, beautiful elderly woman. And she made frequent trips to the neighborhood post office. She did, almost every day. And one day she arrived to find a long line of people who were waiting for service from the postal clerks. And Martha, only needing stamps, mind you, got into line. Well, a helpful person, someone else in line, suggested for her to use the stamp machine where there was no line. The woman said that Martha could get all the stamps she needed and wouldn't have to wait or stand in any lines. Well, Martha knew what she was doing. She thanked the woman and then said, "I know, but the machine can't ask me about my arthritis." That's a cute story. Cute on its surface, at least. But is it really? Is it? The story is really about loneliness. Martha's willing to make that long trip to the post office and then stand in line, a long line, just to have a conversation. Let's remember that the next time we see an elderly person. Okay? Strike up a conversation. It doesn't have to be a long one. Just give that person some attention. There was once a woman named Laverne. She was 80 years old and lived in Brooklyn. On her 80th birthday, she decided to prepare her last will and testament. On her 80th birthday. So she went to her pastor to make 2 final requests. First, she said, "I want to be cremated." "I will see to it," the pastor agreed. And then he said, "What's your second request?" Without skipping a beat, Laverne said, "I want my ashes scattered over Bloomingdale's." "Why Bloomingdale's?" the pastor asked. Laverne said, "Then I'll be sure my daughters will visit me twice a week." So that's another one. Funny, but sad, right? Did you know Mother Teresa actually addressed this topic in 1994 at the National Prayer Breakfast in Washington, D.C.? She did. It was part of a larger purpose, and it coincided with her views on abortion. But nonetheless, she made her views known about the elderly and family too. They go hand in hand, actually, the bigger picture of how we treat each other. Her entire speech was close to 35 minutes long. I encourage you all to read it or listen to the entire thing if you can, like on YouTube. But for our purposes here and the topic of how we treat the elderly, I have for you a portion of the speech. So from the 1994 National Prayer Breakfast speech in Washington, D.C., these are the words of Mother Teresa. Jesus insisted that we love one another as he loves each one of us. Jesus gave his life to love us, and he tells us that we also have to give whatever it takes to do good to one another. And in the gospel, Jesus says very clearly, "Love as I have loved you." Jesus died on the cross because that is what it took for him to do good to us, to save us from our selfishness and sin. He gave up everything to do the Father's will, to show us that we too must be willing to give up everything to do God's will, to love one another as he loves each one of us. If we are not willing to give whatever it takes to do good to one another, sin is still in us. That is why we too must give to each other until it hurts. It is not enough for us to say, "I love God, but I also have to love my neighbor." St. John says that you are a liar if you say you love God and you don't love your neighbor. How can you love God, whom you do not see, if you do not love your neighbor, whom you do see, whom you touch, with whom you live? And so it is very important for us to realize that love, to be true, has to hurt. I must be willing to give whatever it takes not to harm other people, and in fact, to do good to them. This requires that I be willing to give until it hurts. Otherwise, there is no true love in me, and I bring injustice, not peace, to those around me. It hurt Jesus to love us. We have been created in his image for greater things, to love and to be loved. We must put on Christ, as Scripture tells us, and so we have been created to love as he loves us. Jesus makes himself the hungry one, the naked one, the homeless one, the unwanted one, and he says, "You did it to me." On the last day, he will say to those on his right, "Whatever you did to the least of these, you did to me." And he will also say to those on his left, Whatever you neglected to do for the least of these, you neglected to do for me. When he was dying on the cross, Jesus said, I thirst. Jesus is thirsting for our love, and this is the thirst of everyone, poor and rich alike. We all thirst for love of others, that they go out of their way to avoid harming us and to do good to us. This is the meaning of true love, to give until it hurts. I can never forget the experience I had in visiting a home where they kept all these old parents of sons and daughters who had just put them into an institution and forgotten them. I saw that in one home, these old people had everything: good food, a comfortable place, television, everything. But everyone was looking toward the door, and I did not see a single one with a smile on their face. I turned to the sister and I asked, why do these people who have every comfort here, why are they looking toward the door? Why are they not smiling? I am so used to seeing the smiles on our people, even the dying ones smile. And sister said, this is the way it is nearly every day. They are expecting, they are hoping that a son or daughter will come to visit them. They are hurt because they're forgotten. And see, this neglect to love brings spiritual poverty. Maybe in our own family, we have somebody who is feeling lonely, who is feeling sick, who is feeling worried. Are we there? Are we willing to give until it hurts in order to be with our family? Or do we put our interests first? These are the questions we must ask ourselves. We must remember that love begins at home. And we must also remember that the future of humanity passes through the family. That was Mother Teresa, folks. Very well said. Again, Google or YouTube the entire speech. It will be well worth your time. So I want to move on and bring this topic to another level. Violence against the elderly. Now, it's bad enough to be lonely and neglected, but what I'm about to share with you is a story of an elderly woman who lived alone, who didn't take some safety precautions that, let me just say it this way. What I'm hoping is that after you hear this story, you will pay a visit to all the elderly people you know who live alone, or at least call them. Okay, call them to share what you are about to learn. If you do, that will be the silver lining. Learning from someone else's mistakes. Okay, learning to prevent another tragedy. So here's the story. About 20 years ago, an elderly woman named Angelina was sitting in her living room, and she was enjoying a cool glass of iced tea. It was a sunny, beautiful, warm Saturday morning, and Angelina had just come inside from working in her backyard garden, and she was taking a break. She had opened all the windows and doors so she could allow a warm summer breeze to flow through her house. And this was a house, by the way, that her husband had built for her. A house they had lived in for over 50 years. And they raised 6 children together in that house before he passed away a couple of years ago. She was 85 years old and didn't want to move. She didn't want to move away from her home because she was independent and she loved her freedom. Well, on this particular day, as Angelina was bringing that glass of tea to her lips, a large man walked through her front door and right into her house, totally unannounced, totally uninvited. This man was a criminal. He walked into Angelina's house. He ignored her cries for help, and then he proceeded to unplug the television set located on a stand across the room. Angelina, of course, was startled, scared, actually. Who wouldn't be? Especially at 85. But remember, she was independent. She was independent-minded, and she lived alone at 85 years old. What could she do against a much younger man? In this case, not much, but bless her heart, she tried. She tried, and that turned out to be a big mistake. She didn't really know her abilities. When that man began taking her television, she actually tried to stop him. She got up from her chair, moved toward him, and tried to take the television out of his hands. She tried to resist what he was doing, but it all backfired. It was no contest. Come on, how could it be? An 85-year-old against a much larger, much younger man? So what happened next? to make his getaway, the man backhanded her and she fell to the ground. 85 years old. Sad. And it didn't end here. She crawled to the phone that she had next to her chair. Her intent was to call 911. As soon as she picked up the phone, he was right there, right next to her. He slapped the phone out of her hand, and then he pushed her down further. She was on her knees at the time. This time she just laid there, crying, and the man took the television set, and then he went out the door. Now, why am I telling you this? Oh, and by the way, he was caught. Yeah, he was caught. And guess what? This isn't part of the purpose of the story, but guess what the penalty was? Okay, was it battery, substantial battery, burglary? Was that the crime? It started out that way. Substantial battery and burglary. But as the case made its way through the system, it was pleaded down to a state disorderly conduct. And that, my friends, is our system. I'll tell you what, if things don't change very soon, well, I'm going to save that sermon for another time, okay? Let's get back to this case. So why did I tell you this story? You're going to see a pattern with me sometimes where I will take something tragic and try to make something positive out of it. It won't always undo the bad, but maybe it can help others by way of prevention. So here's the crime prevention side of me coming out. This tragic incident where an 85-year-old is battered, stolen from, and left lying on her own living room floor could have been prevented. And I'm not talking about strength in numbers here either, even though that would have helped. Angelina has a right to live how she wants, alone if she wants. In the same house, her and her husband raised the children, all that. Here's the rub. Here's what could have saved her from going through that ordeal. Lock the screen door to your house when you are home. Lock that door. It's not Angelina's fault. Of course, not one bit. But if that screen door was locked, it may have bought her some time. Or maybe it would have scared off the offender. We all know the sound of someone pulling on a screen door. That rat-tat-tat-tat sound, right? We all know it. Well, if Angelina, who was in the living room, heard that sound and saw a stranger trying to get inside her home, she could have either run away or made that 911 call. Either way, she would not have been physically hurt. That's the most important part of this case. An 85-year-old elderly woman was battered. Disgusting. Now, is what I'm saying 100% foolproof? Of course not. Could the man have punched through the screen and reached in and unlocked the door? Sure, it's possible, but that takes time. And it also makes noise. Criminals do not like noise. Most of the time it scares them off. But again, not always. But in this case, maybe Angelina could have run away. Or she could have called 911, like I said. Or maybe the offender would flee. We won't know. We won't know, though, because Angelina didn't have those tools. She didn't have those abilities at that time. So please, listen to this. Share this story, okay? Don't let this happen to you or someone you care about, especially someone elderly. All right, let's take a break. And when we return, I'm going to share a very bizarre story with you. It should be funny and entertaining.
I'm so bored.
Honey, let's play Random Road Trip.
There's nothing to do.
Let's play Random Road Trip.
Hey, I know. Let's play Random Road Trip.
Great idea, honey.
Go to www.randomroadtripthegame.com to learn how you can create a lifetime of memories while spending quality time with the people that you care about. And all for just $20.
Hey, I just had a great idea. The holidays are right around the corner. We should give Random Road Trip games as gifts this year.
Or we should give Random Road Trip games as gifts this year.
I don't know how you come up with these great ideas. What was the website again?
It's www.randomroadtripthegame.com.
Welcome to fun.
Welcome back. So I do have a funny story to share with you, but before I do that, let me wrap up the discussion about 1 Timothy. This is really interesting. I like the way Pastor Matthew Henry explains it. He says the Apostle Paul gave rules to Timothy about something called reproving. I had no idea what reproving was, so I had to look it up. And reproving is the expressing of blame or disapproval. So you can see where this is going in our discussion about how we treat the elderly and, of course, each other. So Matthew Henry continues by saying that ministers are reprovers by the position they hold. So this means that part of a minister's duties, and he says the most displeasing part, by the way, but nonetheless, ministers are to preach the word of God, and in doing so, there will be some reproving, or to use the word rebuking. Okay, remember that word. Okay, so even though ministers, as part of their duties, must do this, care must be taken, and there must be a difference in the way the elderly are reproved. Clear as mud, right? All right. He emphasizes what we already discussed, that an elderly person be treated like a father or mother. Okay? The bottom line, compassion must be shown. That makes sense. And then he goes on to say that a minister, which can be us, by the way. So when I say minister, that means any of us in that position. So he goes on to say that respect must be shown regarding the dignity of their years, and therefore they must not be rebuked sharply. We're showing respect for the years of the elderly person, and we should. Now back to Matthew Henry. He further says that Paul, the Apostle Paul, wasn't telling Timothy he should never correct an older man, but he was making it clear that respect should be shown for his age, and it should be done with kindness and in a gentle manner. So what's true for Timothy applies to all of us in the family of God. I like that. Now he continues. God's word makes it clear that we are to honor our fathers and mothers and to respect those who are older. Now, in the second part of verse 1, Paul instructs Timothy in the way he should treat younger men. He is to treat younger men as brothers, like we've already established. And the reason is this. He is reminding him of the family relationship in the church. He wants him to know that younger men are not Timothy's enemies, but instead his brothers. So there's to be care and concern and respect shown for them, just as we would care for our own flesh and blood brothers and sisters. And so when we treat one another in this way, what he's saying is we deepen our relationships with each other. Pretty deep stuff, right? Pretty deep stuff. All right, I want to share with you another experience I had where I must say, not to toot my own horn, but as a younger cop, I showed patience and care for an elderly person. Now, please know, I don't deserve accolades or anything like that for doing what I'm supposed to do, but you might find this amusing. My first 11 years of service were spent on the third shift. Third shift is a different world. It's not as busy, call volume-wise, as second shift, but the calls we get can be quite bizarre. Over the course of this podcast series, you're going to hear a bunch of them. I forgot more stories than I can remember, trust me. But on this one particular night, it was morning actually, about 3 a.m., I'm riding solo and I get a call to respond to an elderly woman's house because she was afraid of the troll living under her couch. And yes, I said troll. I had no backup on this call. Usually another officer will get dispatched or someone free will just show up to help out. Not this time. Nobody wanted to touch this one. Of course, the thought being mental illness was involved, which it was. The woman residing at the house had dementia and truly believed a troll was living under her couch. And she was legitimately frightened. So the first thing to know, and we're taught this, is if it's real to the citizen, then it's real, period. We have to take them seriously. And sometimes when we don't, when we veer away from this training and our moral obligation, things can go bad. I'm not perfect, and I'm not saying I never veered, okay, in my career, but on this night, I didn't. I did not. I feel I did everything correctly. So when I arrived, this woman was pacing in her kitchen, back and forth, maybe in a 6-foot area. She was visibly upset and nervous. Now remember, perception is reality. She thought there was a troll under her couch. And here's why I'm telling you this story, at least in part. I did too. I thought there was a troll under her couch. After listening to her explain what she saw under her couch and doing it with such emotion and such conviction, by the end, I was convinced there was a troll. I'm saying this half tongue-in-cheek, but I really was hesitant to stick my face down there to check it out. Now, if you listened to the last episode, you heard me mention that I, and probably many of us, have the strangest thoughts at some of the most peculiar times. Well, this is kind of like that. And here's what I mean. When this woman said troll, I heard leprechaun in my mind. They're totally different, but I heard leprechaun. And not only that, I envisioned the leprechaun from those horror movies of the 1990s. Have you seen those? Hopefully not, but maybe an ad or two. Anyway, if you know the character I'm talking about, imagine sticking your face under a couch to find him there. Okay, I know, crazy. So here's what happened. I eventually came back to reality and was able to comfort the woman. And then to completely shut down her fears, I did. I put my face right in the leprechaun's lair to show her there was no troll. There was no pot of gold either, by the way, but there was no troll. But that wasn't quite good enough. I actually had to lift the couch to show her too, which I did. And she was content. Of course, what I just told you was the funny part of the story. I'm making fun of myself. But the extra part is this woman needed some more help, which she did receive. After showing her, proving to her that there was no troll, I was able to locate her son, who lived in town, thank God. Sometimes that can be a mess. And we also notified our local crisis intervention organization. Sadly, we don't do a lot of our own follow-up after a call like this, but I hope she was taken care of from that point forward. I'm pretty sure she was. So that's going to wrap things up for us today. Thanks for listening. And please email me at bluehalopodcast@gmail.com. Send me your stories or just say hi. I'll talk to you soon. God bless.
When I close my eyes, I hear your voice whispering